The agenda is set. I'm Brink in Berlin. It's time to talk. They fight chemical weapons and they've won the Nobel Peace Prize, but why isn't the world cheering? Some say this man is worthy of a Nobel Prize. Is it really time to rethink Putin's Russia? And attempted coups and militias galore. Libya, welcome to North Africa's Wild West. Well, welcome to the show, everyone. I've invited three people today to talk, argue, and pry apart these headlines. My first guest today says Libya is close to anarchy. He has dodged bombs himself in Libya. In fact, he did that when Gaddafi was overthrown. I'm happy to welcome to the show the journalist and former member of the German parliament, Mr. Jürgen Todenhöfer. Mr. Todenhöfer, it's good to have you on the show today. You are an outspoken critic of the West's policies in Libya. I look forward to hearing from you today on the show. My second guest says that Russia is changing and the world had better take notice. I'm happy to welcome to the show Dmitri Trenin. He is director of the Carnegie Moscow Center. He's here today to tell us why Europe and the U.S. need to accept that Russia is no longer a geopolitical spoiler. Dmitri, good to have you on the show as well. And my next guest was thrilled when she heard that the Nobel Peace Prize had been awarded to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. She helped to set up the OPCW back in the 1990s. I'm happy to welcome to the show Mitslal Kifleyesus to the show.
Thank you.
Mitslal, it's good to have you on the show. Let me begin with you by asking you, does the chemical weapons watchdog deserve the Nobel Peace Prize?
Yes, greatly, because I think in today's international politics it's necessary to recognize who are the actors who can participate in peace building. And one of the international organizations which was built to destroy the chemical weapons, which is the Organization for the Prohibition of Weapons, chemical weapons, is one which got the Nobel Prize. And I consider Nobel doesn't mean only for individuals who have done a Nobel Prize, noble activities, but individuals in a collective who have achieved that deserves also to be said what they have done is noble.
Okay, I mean, the Nobel Committee, agrees with you. Gentlemen, what do you think? I mean, does this watchdog deserve the Nobel Peace Prize? Dmitri.
Well, I'd say this, whether it deserves or not is not a subject on which I would like to weigh in. I think it's more interesting to see a new trend emerging within the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. They're not giving the prize sometimes for achievements, for accomplishments. Rather, they think ahead. They gave the Nobel Peace Prize to Obama, President Obama, not for any accomplishments by that time, but for the trend that he represented.
Like an advance check, in
right.
a way.
And this is the same thing on the eve of the operation, an unprecedentedly difficult operation in Syria, to give a peace prize to the organization that will be engaged in this potentially deadly activity. I think that was behind the thinking of the people.
You agree, Jürgen?
No. I would think about this idea to give a Nobel Peace Prize to these people if they would persuade the United States to destroy their chemical weapons. They still have a lot. And they say they need till 2020 to destroy them. So this would need.
So you're saying it was not the right decision to give this watchdog,
of course,
the Nobel
Peace
Prize.
No reason to give it a prize for that.
All right. Well, there was a collective disappointment last Friday in much of the world when the news came that the 2013 Nobel Peace Prize is going to the world's chemical weapons watchdog, the OPCW. Most bets were on the 16-year-old Pakistani girl known simply as Malala, who was shot by the Taliban for daring to go to school. Now, Malala has become an international symbol of hope in the face of violence, hatred, and war. She inspires people to do better. Few people knew about the OPCW until it became part of the plan to somehow defuse the Syrian civil war. On paper, the watchdog looks like a force for good, but on the ground, many say that the OPCW is powerless to promote real peace.
This year's Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to the OPCW for its efforts in eliminating chemical weapons. Experts from the Hague-based organization have carried out over 5,000 inspections since 1997 in dozens of countries. 60,000 tons of chemical weapons have been destroyed as a result. The OPCW has been in the spotlight recently for its deployment to Syria. It's been charged with destroying the country's entire chemical weapons stockpile by mid-2014. That is a dangerous mission taking place in the midst of a civil war that's killed over 100,000 people in 2 years. The Nobel Committee said recent events in Syria where chemical weapons have been used show how crucial it is to do away with them. But destroying chemical weapons is only part of the effort to achieve peace. So how effective can the OPCW be?
Mitslal, that is the big question now. Is this watchdog going to promote peace in Syria? That's what the world wants to know.
Yeah, let me say first that I cannot talk on the behalf of the organization because I'm not representing the organization, but my own personal opinion. Yes, it does. There are many aspects. One has to remember is chemical weapons are a mass destruction weapons. This is a weapon which can destroy in a very limited time an enormous of people and enormous of places. As a result, to destroy them and to have an international organization which verifies, inspects the destruction of chemical weapons is a very important activity.
Is that happening, though?
It does happen. I mean, I don't have access to the documentation or to the declarations itself, but the destruction of a chemical weapon is a very long approach. Creating a chemical weapon is very easy, but destroying it takes a lot of time.
My question, though, is how can we verify that what is being disclosed to the OPCW is true? How do we know that Bashar al-Assad is telling the truth about his chemical weapon stockpile?
Well, there are many aspects for individuals or for member states. An international organization like OPCW is a member states organization. It's not an individual. So member states have a right to ask and have a right to verify whether the information which are collected by the organization are correct. And that's why we have...
ask.
Yeah, well, not only they ask. There is a lot of instruments of inspection. There is a trial inspection. There is on-site inspection. There is a challenge inspection.
But there's never been a challenge inspection since this watchdog started, right?
Well, even if there would have not been a challenge inspection, only places where the threat of chemical weapons which happened is in the case of Syria. So Syria was not a member of the OPCW. As a result, you cannot also have a challenge inspection to Syria itself. But among member states, they commit themselves to fulfill an international treaties and to give an institution.
I agree with you on that. I think probably a lot of people in the international community are going to ask, how can we believe Bashar al-Assad when he commits to anything now at this stage? And that's why the validity of what the watchdog is telling us now, a lot of people are going to have a problem believing that. Gentlemen, I mean...
I was a spokesman for arms control during 7 years during the time of nuclear arms deployment in Germany. Of course, you can hide chemical weapons. And if Assad would like to hide chemical weapons, he could. But he would be completely crazy. He has a political reason to open everything up because these talks about chemical weapons open the possibility to have talks about a peace solution in Syria. That's the importance of these inspectors. Because beside the talks about these chemical weapons, the Americans have, without losing their face, they have the possibility to talk to Assad and to open a channel and to try to find out if there is a way to solve this horrible tragedy with negotiations.
Well, I mean, I'm not worried about the Americans losing face here. My concern is, can this agency get accurate and truthful information from the member states?
Well, it does.
Technically not, no.
No, there is a way you can get it, because the question is in the chemical weapons, the impact of chemical weapons is whether you have 1 gram or not gram is not the implication among member states, among state relationship, whether it is correct. Is this the process? Peace is built in a process. peace is not built because you gave me an information today. It means tomorrow you can also build it. I mean, chemical weapons, to build a chemical weapon is not a big technology. The fact is that a state, when a state commits itself or willing to commit to itself and opens the door for verification, for inspection, it is a big achievement. Because peace building is not made only because you have made a declaration.
Well, I'd say this. I think that the crucial issue here is that Assad is interested in playing by the rules. He has received a lot in return for his willingness to disarm chemically. He would be in a very bad situation, he knows, if he is caught cheating. So he is not crazy. He's a rational thinking person, and he has every reason to stick to his commitment. That's a better guarantee than anything you can have from the organization, from the international community, or from anyone else. And I think that the Russians have told him in no uncertain terms that they will be backing him as long as he sticks to that commitment. Mr. Putin has invested too much in that, and he doesn't want to be second-guessed by Bashar al-Assad.
There's another guarantee. The Russians have constructed the stores where the chemical weapons are, and they are watching them. So they have much more control that the world public knows.
Well, I really don't know how much actual influence the Russians have there. It's always been a pretty closed state. But I think the political issue here is even more important. But the Russians have, I think, a lot of intelligence on the ground.
I mean, I look at the case. We're going to talk about Libya later on in the show, but I want to just talk about when Libya joined the OPCW. I think it was 2004, and Gaddafi disclosed what he had, and we found out, of course, later that he did not tell the truth, that he had these stockpiles hidden. That we found out, of course, after he was toppled. And why should we assume that Bashar al-Assad would not do something similar to that?
Well, let's take the consideration, the scenario, even he has something to hide. Okay, one is the chemical weapons. Having chemical weapons, even for the military itself, it's not a safe instrument. But let's say you take a state, head of a state is lying and not telling the truth. But despite that, the role of an international organization, a role of a neutral, possible neutral ground where member states could participate is you start a process. Within the process, you have a state which is sitting in front of you to ask declarations, to verify the declaration, whether it's a truth. Maybe the destruction of the chemical weapons would not happen like the way we wish it within 1 or 2 years, which will take time. But you have started a process, a negotiation, and this is peace building.
I just wonder how successful the organization is going to be. I mean, we want to talk about, getting the Nobel Peace Prize. When I look at the numbers, the United States has not destroyed all of its stuff. 10% still exist. Russia has destroyed about 76%, is the latest number I found. You have all of these countries that have a lot of transparency, but Israel's not a member of the OPCW.
It has chemical weapons.
But the point is, you've got all this transparency, and yet no one is playing completely by the rules. So.
But sorry, you're answering yourself. The United States has destroyed 90%. Do you know the cost of destruction of chemical weapons is a huge budget itself. The process, not only the budget itself, the procedure of destruction takes time. But 90% of a destruction is already a good achievement. But more than that, the willingness for a member state to destroy is 100% is also an achievement. And also, if you get whether US or Russia or any other member state to allow an inspection, to allow a declaration, to allow every year a pressure to say you have not finished the destruction, it's a big power, and one should not underestimate that.
The fact that we're having this discussion, is the Nobel Peace Prize diminished by the fact that we can't really pinpoint achievement?
Well, I think it's a good argument. I think that since you have to give the prize every year on an annual basis, whether something happens or not. You're obligated. You cannot say there have been no achievements in the world worth being recognized with the Nobel Peace Prize. You're under pressure to name somebody. There's competition. There are people with all sorts of agendas weighing in on the decision-making process. So I think, yeah, I mean, it is. Sometimes you recognize the prize as really hitting the bullseye, and sometimes it's just, you know, placeholder. You give it to somebody for something that looks like, you know, in principle, a good thing, or you try to motivate with a prize. That's the new policy, I think, of the community.
Okay, so it's not rewarding; it's motivating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we are.
But also, don't you think you're looking at the world as if it is a black and white, and things has to be precisely at this point? One should recognize processes, but specifically in today's politics, in today's international politics.
I agree with you 100% on that. But I think when there are other candidates for the prize who have clearly demonstrated something amazing, extraordinary, and they don't get the prize, then obviously the discussion begins, well, what's the thinking going on behind this decision? I mean, it's a legitimate question. Let me ask you this, because we have to move on. Let me ask all three of you, yes or no, do you think a year from now, will the OPCW, will it have earned the Peace Prize? It's got a year to go into Syria and dismantle these chemical weapons. Will it earn that prize in the next 12 to 14 months? Jürgen, what do you think?
I think the prize was given to the wrong organization. I think the chance for peace comes because we have now talks about chemical weapons. Though they are just a medium to have peace talks.
All right.
Dmitri. They are the implementers. They are not those who made the process possible.
Yeah.
But they are the implementers. They will have to go into a civil war environment and do their job.
Lavrov did much more.
And what do you say?
Yes, they do, because I think the member states are the one who gets the ownership of the OPCW's Nobel Prize. OPCW is made by the member states, and the member states are achieving, and if we get it within the 1 year, the whole total chemical weapons free place. There is now better than that you could wish. And I believe the role of the media, the role of this prize would give like Angola, like South Sudan, like Egypt, like Syria has just joined. We have only some countries left, and it would be very good. And I think it has honored it already, and they would do it.
Very good. You know, several weeks ago, I asked on this show, is Russian President Vladimir Putin now a contender for the Nobel Peace Prize? And guess what? He was nominated. Russian media say that the Nobel Committee gave a nod to Putin by awarding the Peace Prize to the OPCW. After all, it was Putin who ran with the idea of putting Syria's chemical weapons under international control. The biggest takeaway from all of this is that the whole world is now talking about Russia as a game changer in geopolitics, no longer the spoiler, but suddenly the mover and shaker. And some faces here in the West are not reacting with smiles.
At the G8 summit in June, relations between Barack Obama and Vladimir Putin were frosty. The two leaders were backing opposite sides in the Syrian conflict, and peace seemed a long way off. But then Russia pushed forward a plan to destroy Syria's chemical weapons. It had the double effect of removing the need for a U.S. military intervention and protecting President Assad. Putin has always believed Russia should be taken seriously on the diplomatic stage. Now he was seen by some as making peace where America could not. But within his own country, there is conflict. Putin has shown a less dovish streak in the war in Chechnya. And the crackdown on gay rights demonstrators has raised concerns, especially in the West, as have the arrests of migrants following anti-migrant riots in Moscow. So what's the right balance between criticism of Putin's Russia and engagement with it?
Dmitri, I want your opinion on this. Do you think the Nobel Peace Prize Committee was giving a nod to Putin?
No, I don't think so. I think it would be too dangerous to be seen as a friend of Mr. Putin's in the West. I don't think so.
But a lot of people are interpreting that.
Well, people in Russia may be interpreting it like that, but, well, first of all, we have not seen the end of the story. We're at the beginning, right? The Syrian chemical weapons are where they are. The Syrian civil war is raging around it. The whole thing has not been done. The whole thing is only at the very beginning of being done. So it's too early.
But the whole world now is talking about Russia. Russia being a game changer. Russia stealing the thunder from Washington in Syria. Are we looking at a new type of Russian power on the global stage?
I don't think so. I believe we were overselling Russia at this point. I believe what happened was that, yes, Putin saw an opportunity out there. An opportunity to prevent U.S. military strikes against Syria, which he thought would spoil the right trend initiated by President Obama of retrenchment back to the U.S. He thought that that would nix it and that would send us back to the bad days. Now, his longer-term goal is to, I think, is to enhance the influence of, call them new isolationists in the United States, people who do not believe in the value of military interventionism around the world. From Putin's perspective, that would make the world a better place, a safer place, and that would give a bit more breathing space to Russia.
Well, it's about giving him breathing space, right? Because
Well,
he doesn't want the world looking inside Russia and examining what's going on there.
Well, the world is welcome to look inside. The world is not welcome to work inside Russia, in Putin's view, to change things in Russia. So that's the difference. I think we live in a world with glass borders. We very well see what's happening in your neighbor's room, or even in some room thousands of miles away from where you are. That's no problem criticizing people. The problem, I think, from Putin's perspective, and I'm not his fan, is to make sure that no one materially interferes in your country's domestic politics. That's the issue.
And that's international law. You don't have the right to interfere.
That's the argument that Mr. Putin is using, absolutely, yes. And that's what traditional law says.
I mean, but the paradox that a lot of people talk about now is Putin doesn't want to recognize international law, but at the same time, he wants to strengthen the Security Council, and he wants to use the UN as a bulwark against the United States for any type of intervention in another country. It's like he wants to have his cake and eat it too.
I would say that I don't think that he is a strong supporter of traditional international law. It's not so much the new additions which have not yet become international law, like humanitarian interventionism. He is very much against that. But I don't think his goal is to work against the United States. I think he wants, and forgive me the expression, to cut the U.S. down to size. He wants the U.S. to be a primus inter pares, and not the hegemon that rules the world. That's Putin's...
But help us read, Dmitri, help us read Russia here. Is this about cutting America down to size, or is this about building Russia up? Those are two different things.
He is building Russia up primarily within Russia. He understands pretty well how many problems Russia has at this point, how brittle this notional stability in Russia is, how dire the economic situation in Russia is, what it means to social peace in Russia a couple of years down the road, what it means to the political stability in Russia. We're witnessing riots, anti-immigrant riots in Moscow, and that points to, in my view, the gravest national security threat to Russia, inter-ethnic relations in bigger cities in Russia. So Mr. Putin is pretty much aware of these things.
And that's not on the radar of the international community right now.
Well,
I mean, that's something, it made headlines this past week, the riots we saw in Moscow, but I don't think when the world looks at Russia, they're looking at a nation that could fall apart.
No, it's not falling apart, but it's a nation beset. Well, first of all, it's a country, not a nation, right? Yeah, that's Mr. Putin's big worry, big concern, big plan is to build a nation. He's building it top down. He's trying to build a nation.
But haven't we been there before, Dmitri? I mean, didn't Lenin try to do that?
No,
didn't Stalin?
No,
We've been there before.
Lenin had a communist project, and he butchered so many Russians and Stalin.
But I think
to construct that communist project.
But why not run into the arms of your Western friends and neighbors? They all, the people in Europe and in the United States, they're mystified. They don't understand Russia because they think the Russians are just like the West. They think Russia is the West.
That's the old question.
Russia is European, but what the West means today is not a very clear concept. We knew what the West was in the days of the Cold War. Today's West is much, the borders of today's West are much more blurred. But let me say this. I think that the Russians have tried that before. Mr. Yeltsin tried to become a formal ally of the United States when he came to President Bush, the elder President Bush in 1992. He said, how about signing an alliance with us now? And Bush basically said, you know, the Cold War is over. We don't need alliances. We need partnerships. Fine.
Well, that sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah, right.
He enlarged the NATO.
Right. And then there was the enlargement of NATO that stopped at the Russian border. It would have been a different enlargement had it included Russia. And there were people in Russia who wanted to be, and Yeltsin himself wanted to be admitted to NATO. No, Russia was not seen as eligible for that. Mr. Putin himself, in 2001, essentially pledged an alliance to the younger President Bush, right, after 9/11. And he talked about Russia's European choice. Now, the U.S. administration lost interest in Russia. The following year, 2002, they moved on to do Iraq. Russia was laying by the wayside. Mr. Medvedev, on Mr. Putin's orders, I should say, in 2010, proposed to NATO what looks like, to me, the equivalent of a strategic alliance by merging ballistic missile defenses, right? The West told him that it's too early for that.
So is the West... Does the West carry the blame then for this? I mean, that's what it sounds like.
I'm not engaged in the blame game. I think that may be the right thing, that Russia was turned down every time. Because there's one thing about Russia that does not fit very well into the Western concept. The West has a leader, a very well-recognized leader. Russia, the Russian elites, are not ready to accept anyone as their leader.
Well, what's Putin?
No. Any other country as their leader.
Okay. I mean,
that's the problem.
Could Dmitri be also that the fact now, what you're saying also is demonstrating that Putin is believing more in international treaties and in international organizations to promote a national interest rather than this bilateral relationship. And I think the case of specifically now Syria demonstrates Putin bringing, to the surprise of the Western, let's call it the Western society, saying, okay, let's open Syria, but not as an individual America doing a job, but in the international community, and I would participate in my own role of influencing. And this could be because of the fact of the past experiences and also the desire. The only way you can guarantee your sovereign right if you believe in international organizations, which allows you to demonstrate that you are sovereign, is also a necessity. Could that be also the way that from Putin's role of international relationship?
I'm being told we have to move on. So I just wanted to pull up some numbers here about what the Russians think about the West. There's been some new numbers that have come out, and the number of, or the percentage of Russians who have an unfavorable opinion of the United States has increased dramatically in the last 10 years, but also the percentage of Russians who have an unfavorable opinion of the EU and Europe has also increased dramatically. What have we done?
Yeah, but there are a lot of reasons. After the fall of the Soviet Union, I think Gorbachev has been very generous. He allowed the unification of Germany, and they did a lot. And then we enlarged NATO till the borders of this country, of Russia. And they have the feeling that we didn't give back anything.
Well, would a solution, because we have to move, would a solution be something very radical, to change policy with NATO and to invite Russia to become a full-fledged member, for the European Union to also say we want Russia to become a full-fledged member of the EU? Would that solve all of this misunderstanding?
This was a chance, but I think we have missed the chance, and they don't trust the Western countries anymore. And as far as Dmitri was talking about the targets of the Russians, I think they have also a target. They want to play a role in the Middle East, and they don't want to lose Tartus. And all the Middle East is extremely important for the United States, and therefore, it's important for the Russians. They want to play a role in the world.
Proxy, all kinds.
But let me say just one
really
thing.
Quickly, we'll move on.
Yes, because I think Russia has now stepped up to a totally new level of its international engagement. And it clearly requires more resources to play at that level, resources of all kinds. And I think it would be extremely important now for Russia to rise up to that challenge that Mr. Putin actually has accepted. And we will see. We're only at the beginning. Hopefully, Russia can play at that higher level of international
So you're
politics.
bullish on Putin's Russia?
No, I'm not bullish. I'm bullish on Russia. Let's put it that way.
All right. All right, we're going to move on. Did you ever think that we would look at Libya and long for the relative order that Muammar Gaddafi guaranteed when he was a dictator? Well, a lot of people in Libya and around the globe are doing just that. The country is a mess. 2 years after the revolution, turf wars and clashes between rival militia rule the day. Human smugglers have turned Libya into the main port of departure for African migrants trying to reach Europe. Tripoli's zoo is now a detention center for illegal immigrants. And as we saw last week, it takes just a handful of security guards to send the government into chaos.
Prime Minister Ali Zaidan was seized from his bed in the early morning hours. He was abducted by more than 100 men, believed to be former members of rebel groups that helped overthrow Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. Zaidan was released hours later, and the exact circumstances of the kidnapping remain unclear. But the Prime Minister has blamed armed militias and described the incident as an attempted coup. There are about 200,000 armed militiamen in Libya. They're mostly paid by the government, but often they're loyal only to their own commanders. In the days of Colonel Gaddafi, such lawlessness was unknown. But NATO intervention not only helped rebels topple the dictator, it also left a country with weak political institutions. So is Libya going from bad to worse?
Yeah, Jürgen, you've been there. You were there also during the revolution.
Several times, yeah.
Is Libya going to become a failed state?
There is a huge danger that it is becoming a failed state, but that's a little bit normal. After revolutions, countries need a lot of time to have a stable infrastructure, to have a stable government. France needed 80 years after the French Revolution to become a stable democracy. Germany needed, if you take also the time of Hitler, 32 years to become a democracy, or to become a democracy again. And so they need time. That's normal. But I think that the military intervention of NATO has worsened the things, has made things more difficult because it destroyed all the political structures in this country.
Would Gaddafi still be in power had there been no NATO intervention?
No. You know, first of all, I think that countries have to make their revolutions themselves. Second, I think NATO didn't interfere to bring freedom to Libya. They never interfered. We never interfered in in Iraq or in Afghanistan to bring freedom and human rights to these people. We interfered because we have interest. We have interest in this country, and nobody...
But the international community, I mean, this was an international effort. I mean, it wasn't one country going alone.
But the Russians, for example, they feel cheated because they accepted this intervention, but they didn't accept a regime change. And at the end, it became an effort to make a regime change. And I was there, I was attacked by the troops of Gaddafi. A friend of mine was killed. I was bombarded by the troops of Gaddafi. They tried to kill me. So I have no reason to have sympathies for these men. But when the world public said, now Gaddafi is advancing against Benghazi and he will commit a massacre, I was there 2 days before. I said, why should he make a massacre? He wouldn't have committed a massacre, because a massacre meant that he would have lost everything in this country. So we, like always before an intervention, we invented something. We said,
who is we?
This was the world opinion, the media, the politicians, people who have never been in a revolution, people who have never been in Libya.
So you're saying all the people, all the Libyans who rose up against Gaddafi, you're saying all of that was fabricated by Westerners?
No. I said there was the hope to make a revolution and to get democracy. I was with the rebels. I was with young students who wanted democracy.
Yeah,
but that's another thing. But this doesn't mean that we need a military intervention by former colonialists. The French were colonialists, the British were colonialists in this region, and the Italians too. And they didn't come to liberate this country. They destroyed the country. They killed also many civilians. I was in many hospitals. I met people who lost members by this intervention. And this intervention didn't help anything like all the military interventions. And therefore, I'm also with the traditional international law, which says interventions in other countries are not allowed.
Jürgen, you just wrote a book in German. The English title of it is "Thou Shalt Not Kill."
Yeah. I've seen only misery by these interventions. In Iraq. What is in Iraq? We went there to bring democracy. Where is the democracy in Iraq?
But where's
democracy in Afghanistan?
Where is your anger, though? Okay, let's look at what's happened. Let's compare Syria and Libya.
Yeah.
All right, there's no foreign intervention right now. There's no military campaign. Yeah. But the Russians continue selling weapons to Syria, and those weapons are being used against Syrian citizens.
That's too easy. Yeah, but Saudi Arabia is selling, and Qatar selling weapons to the rebels.
Where is your anger, though, at that business transaction going on? That also allows people to be killed.
Yeah, first of all, I have been in Libya 3 or 4 times during the revolution. And I've been in Syria during this revolution or this war 6 times. And I think it's a tragedy. The security forces of the government are killing people in a brutal way, and the rebels are killing people in a brutal way. And they both, like in the Civil War in the United States, they both are killing. And what I say, the solution is not a military intervention. The solution are negotiations to start to talk.
Would Libya be better off if Gaddafi were still in power?
I don't say that he should still be in power, but he was old and his time was running out, and it was up to the Libyans to find a solution. But it was not up to the Europeans, especially to France, Italy, United States.
Is the Libyan mess, do we carry the West? Is it our fault?
Not only.
I don't say it's our fault, but it didn't improve anything. It killed people, and now the country is destroyed. It's destroyed by the revolution, but it's also destroyed by this intervention. And let me say one thing.
We're running out of time. Let me just say one thing. Just be quiet. Just one thing.
I would say this. You go in, you break it, you own it, right? You have to stay and see it through. It's an extremely difficult decision to go in, but once you're in, You're in for the long haul. You've got to fix it. You cannot walk away 10 years later.
And is that
No,
the case
the Russians went into Chechnya, right? Grozny was leveled. Chechnya is, of course, part of the Russian Federation. Grozny was leveled. Go to Grozny today. The Russians are spending zillions on Chechnya, zillions. And this is peace building. A lot of Russian people are very angry that their government is so generous with rehabilitating a former rebel province.
Are you saying
now, I'm saying that once you go to Iraq, you have to stay for a very long time. Once you go to Libya,
that's very important.
Once you go to Libya, you have to stay there. You have to make sure that the various militias are brought under control, that the government is worth more than its name, that there is a police force that can protect at least their prime minister, that foreign embassies do not get attacked, that your own ambassador is not killed. That's what you should be doing.
So the West has dropped the ball.
It did.
Yeah.
That's
exactly like what Dmitri says. It is the responsibility afterward. You can't, as a Western country, also say, just look at it because the others should finish their job by themselves. That you can't. We cannot afford it also. But the fact is we have to take the responsibilities of our actions. And that after destruction, building takes such a long time, and we should have the breeze to do it. And that is what is missing in Libya.
I'm going to check the last one. We've got 30 seconds here. Was Germany actually on the side of right when it abstained from the resolution on Libya?
This was good, and it was good that the United States didn't make this intervention in Syria. And what we should do, what would be the role of Germany to be a fair mediator, to help to find a solution. And I'm not on the side of Assad. I'm not on the side of the rebels. I'm on the side of peace.
All right. We're going to have to wrap it up there. Peace is always a good way to wrap up the show. That's going to end this edition of Agenda with Brent Goff. Remember, you can contact me anytime with your thoughts on the show. You can find me on Facebook. You can tweet me at Brent Goff TV. You can also send us an email. You see the address right there. And if you want to watch the show again, go to our website or watch us on YouTube. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Join me next time when I set the agenda.